Welcome to Crush Your Convo, where we're crushing the conversation one episode at a time. I have one of my absolute favorite Trek authors, David Mack, to discuss his own Trek journey and his recent project on Star Trek Con. Thank you, David, for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Your books actually played a huge role in my very recent Trek journey because I saw Star Trek for the first time just under 4 years ago. And so it was one of those things where having that extra, stories after the shows and movies and stuff, kept it
hmm
going for me and got to learn more about the characters. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
But let's start off with your own origin story. So, how did your love for Trek come from? And were there any other franchises or fandoms that you loved as well?
Well, obviously, I grew up with Trek in syndicated reruns in the early 1970s. I was born just as the series was ending in 1969, but I grew up with it. And, as I've often said, like a duckling, I imprinted on the first moving thing I saw, and that was Trek. So Trek sort of informed my early worldview about everything, about what society should look like, what friendships should be like, what sort of future should we aspire to. Trek set that template for me. As far as what other fandoms, when I was young, I, of course, was big into a lot of the 70s sci-fi pop culture of the time. I liked $6 Million Man. I liked Logan's Run. I was a fan of the original Battlestar Galactica on TV. I love the Star Wars movies. I love Superman, all that sort of stuff. But Star Trek was always the first love. It was always the first obsession and the most powerful. Around the time Star Trek the Motion Picture came out in '79, I had that poster, that cutaway poster of the interior of the Enterprise that showed all the inside workings and where everything was. And I would stare at it and I would memorize it to the point where in my head I could mentally walk through the ship and know where I was and know how to find things and where to go. And so that was the beginning of my ultra geekery. Um, and so, yeah, there were a lot of those sort of fandoms that I was into at that time. And then eventually, movies like Aliens came out. I went to film school around the time movies like The Abyss were coming out, Terminator, Terminator 2. These were all formative works of my adolescence and early adulthood.
Just straight up for sci-fi in general, right?
Well,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like my husband, he loves Star Trek, Star Wars, and if I can try and move over,
Oh, you got a xenomorph there. Yeah. Very nice.
we
Very
got a
nice.
nice geek wall happening right now. So, I mean, my favorite was Jaws, is not sci-fi, but those kind of movies and stuff imprint your childhood and just kind of
Oh,
shape
yeah.
you. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Jaws is a classic. Yeah.
Absolutely. But growing up, did you always want to be a writer? I know you majored in film and television
Mhm.
production, or did you have any other occupation in mind?
Well, when I was a kid of about 10, 11 years old, I dreamed of being an author. I grew up loving reading, loving books, loving stories. My mom would often say that I had this annoying habit, like she would let me watch the little black and white TV in my room at night, just to keep me out of their hair. And I would watch movies on like broadcast TV, like Pink Panther movies or something like that. And at breakfast the next morning, I could recount the entire plot, start to finish. My brain was just wired for story right from the very beginning. But I wanted to be a writer. So around the age of 10 or 11, I would start drawing mock book covers and imagining my name on the front of a book cover. And I started, typing away on a typewriter, trying to figure out how to compose scenes, compose stories. Didn't really have any idea about story structure or where to begin a story or even what a story was, but I was trying. I was at least trying to string words together. So it started early for me, around 9 or 10. I detoured into film because around age 15, while my mom was going to night school, she found that there was a screenwriting class that was happening same night, same time, and she thought I might be interested. So I took the class and I got special permission from the high school to go and permission from the college to attend, even though I hadn't graduated high school yet. And I aced the course, and so I fell in love with script writing. That's what led me to film school. So I sort of had this detour into film and television. And that lasted through maybe around the year 2000 because I had my first writing credit was on television. That was my first professional credit was Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the episode Starship Down that I co-wrote with John Ordover. That was the beginning of my writing career in fiction and storytelling. And from there, I moved over to things like comic books and then eventually into prose storytelling with the Star Trek Corps of Engineers ebooks, and then from there into the paperback Star Trek novels. So I started in loving print, detoured into film, and then came back to my first love at around the age of 30.
Nice. Now, before I actually jump into those Star Trek episodes and stuff like that that you got into, how was it though when you first got your the first book that was printed with your name on it? Because you were saying that you were 10
Mm.
and can imagine it. How did that feel to you when that actually happened?
It's a rush. I mean, it's one of those things. The first book that ever got printed with my name on it was the was it the Star Trek Starfleet Survival Guide. Wasn't a work of narrative fiction per se, but it was a manual set in the fictional technology of the Star Trek universe. And it was about how to survive extreme situations and deal with weird technologies, creatures, etc., that could only happen to you in the Star Trek universe. And it was modeled on a book that was very popular at the time called the Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook. The Star Trek folks wanted to capitalize on the success of that title, so they concocted their own. And one of the editors, a woman named Margaret Clark, was sort of supervising the project. She had a junior editor named Jessica McGivney, who was sort of handling the editorial trafficking work and sort of putting it all together. She had hired a really great artist, Timothy Earls, who's done some work for Star Trek Picard and other iterations of Trek on TV. And so they had an editor and they had an artist. What they didn't have was a writer. And on a recommendation from Margaret, Jessica reached out to me. I said, "Yeah, I'll take that gig. Sure. Yeah, I'll write a book. Let me get this straight. I don't have to pitch the book. It's already approved. I get paid for writing it. And my name goes on the cover. Yeah, I'm in." So I took the gig, got an agent, signed the contract. And it took a little while. I wasn't really prepared at that point for just how slow the publishing wheels are. It takes a long time to go from concept to physical printed book. Um, I was used to TV where everything moves much faster. But eventually I adapted to the new pace of things. And that first time holding that copy, that red book, Starfleet Survival Guide, and there's my name right on the bottom. And I was just like, there it is. That's a book with my name on it. And that's how it all began.
Dream come true, right?
Yep.
So going back to Star Trek, though, it says you tried to pitch stories for Next Generation and Deep Space Nine before you did get Starship Down, and also you had the story idea for It's Only a Paper Moon. Was there a story that you wish had gotten picked up?
Oh, of course. There's always
Uh,
so many that
all
you
of it?
wish. I mean, all of it. I mean, the goal at the time was to so impress these folks at DS9 and Voyager and sell some freelance scripts, not only to pay off my debts and pay some bills, but to get a staff job. The dream was to get invited to come on the staff and move to LA. Well, that never happened for reasons beyond my understanding. John and I made two sales, or three sales right off the bat. We made our first sale to Star Trek Voyager. We sold them a story that ended up never being produced called Sick Bay. And based on the strength of that, we then had a meeting by phone a few weeks later with DS9. We sold Starship Down right off the bat, a few pitches in, and we pitched them what eventually became Paper Moon, but it started out as something very different. Um, in a way, I wish we could have done that original version. The sick bay idea for Voyager, I wish that had gotten made. It would have been really great, a really tense episode, all in real time. The idea is that you see the entire episode from sick bay. You never leave sick bay. The whole thing from opening titles to the end, you never leave sick bay. So you're seeing everything the way the Doctor and Kess see it when the ship is under fire, on the run, getting its ass handed to it. People are coming in. wounded personnel cycle in and out. You've got to learn to do combat medicine where you treat the least injured people first to get them back on the line. And really, really badly injured people, you got to let them die because the time you'll spend on them, you could have put 5 people back on the line to save the ship. So combat medicine is the total inverse of regular emergency medicine. And Kess would have just freaked out. She'd have lost her stuff over this. And we had this great bit where near the end, Neelix comes in gravely, critically wounded, and she's being told by the doctor, you gotta let him go, and she won't. And so they're trying to operate on Neelix, and the ship gets hit, and the doctor's program goes out right after they've cut Neelix open. So Kess would be left standing there in the dark, holding a laser scalpel. The doctor's gone, and her lover is cut open on the table in front of her, and we smacked the commercial. And then they eventually get the doctor's voice back. That's all they can get. And so the doctor voice, as a disembodied voice, has to talk Kess through surgery. And she has to perform surgery. It would have been awesome. It was inspired by
Absolutely.
it was inspired by an episode of MASH where it all takes place in the operating room while they're being shelled by artillery. That was the
Oh, I
inspiration.
remember that. Yeah,
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 that was the
yeah.
inspiration. So we had that inspiration. And then the other idea I wish we could have made, the original version of what became Paper Moon, was much lighter. It was, again, another one of these bottle episodes. As a freelancer, you learn to pitch bottle episodes back in the 90s. Bottle episodes mean it takes place on standing sets that they've already built. You're not going to ask them to build any new sets, minimal special effects, minimal guest stars. You're keeping it tight, and you're spending as little money as possible, and you're shooting as fast as possible so that the time and money they save on your bottle episode, they can spend on their big episodes that are written by the production staff. So we
Production
pitched
dream
them
come true.
they love freelancers who come in with cheap, easy bottle stories. So we had what we
Exactly.
thought was the ultimate bottle story for DS9. Everyone Comes to Quarks, which is a play on the title Everyone Comes to Rick's, which is the name of the original stage play on which the movie Casablanca is based. Well, the idea here is that we set it up like an episode of Cheers, where you have multiple interleaving stories and everything happens in Quark's bar. Every scene, every moment, except for like, cutaways to stock footage of the station to show passage of time, the whole episode would take place in Quarks. So you only have to light the one set and then you're done. You're shooting there for the week. And we've had all these interleaving stories. Cisco and his kid, Jake, are they're replaying a World Series game in a holosuite, and Dax is on a string of bad speed blind dates, and poor Worf just can't seem to get a decent meal because of a confluence of holidays. Every other place on the station is closed, and the Bajoran engineers are all on holiday, and therefore nobody will fix the replicators. And so the only place to get a decent bite to eat is Quarks, which Worf just absolutely hates. And it would have had this classic bit, and to this day I regret that we never were able to get this filmed. It would have been Worf coming in to get a meal, and Quark has to get Worf out because he's about to buy from a black market dealer this Klingon artifact, and only a Klingon would recognize what it really is. If Worf sees this thing, Quark is toast. He's got to get Worf the hell out of here before the black market dealer shows up. But Worf is insistent. He has to eat. So Worf tries to order every single food item you've ever heard of in Star Trek. And one after another, Quark has to go, nope, sorry, sold out, sold the last one. Sorry, Cardassian Bowls ate it. And you quickly realize that what we're actually doing is Monty Python's cheese shop sketch. That Worf is ordering everything in the world, and Quark is telling him he has nothing until finally you get to the very end. Worf is at his wits' end. He's about to kill somebody, and he reaches across the counter and he grabs Quark by the collar and he says, I want a bowl of gok. If I do not get gok, I will rip out your lungs. One bowl of gok coming up. And so Quark goes down, he brings up the bowl, puts it down. Worf goes to dig in, he comes up with a big handful, and he goes, this gok is dead. It's not dead, it's resting. And so there's the parrots, the dead parrot sketch becomes the punchline to the cheese shop sketch. Worf throws the bowl at Quark, storms out. Quark says, "I thought he'd never leave." And so this would have been one of those moments that this Venn diagram of Star Trek and Monty Python fandom, it's a big overlap. Fans would have talked about that sketch forever. that would have been one of those things that would have gone down in history.
And honestly, Michael and Armin would also
Oh, they'd
about
have
that
killed
scene.
that scene.
They
They would have killed it.
Ah, such missed opportunity.
I
That's one
know.
thing that I've learned during my, 4 years of Trek of understanding the behind the scenes and stuff. I'm like, man, that would have been so good. Actually, your sick bay episode, I'm thinking, gosh, if they did that in TNG with Beverly Crusher, I would have eaten that up. Like, I would have
Oh yeah.
loved it, right?
I mean, it would have
Oh
been a
my
very
gosh.
different story in TNG. You'd have had to
Right.
find a different story than Kess, because what makes the Voyager one work is Kess struggling to sort of learn about this new type of medicine, combat medicine,
True.
and freaking out, and then having her lover put in front of her. So finding an analog to that in TNG would be a little difficult, not impossible, but more difficult. It was a
Just a
story
little
that was really,
different.
it was a story that was tailor made to those characters as they existed at that point in time.
Right. Right. No, I would have absolutely loved that. And actually, you're giving me the Coda vibes with Wesley and Beverly. We'll get into that later. But actually, jumping into the litverse here.
Mm.
So, particularly your stories was from between Nemesis up until Picard.
Hmm.
So how did that all just come about? And what was your favorite to write for? Like what character?
Well, I mean, my favorite characters to write for are the ones I created in Star Trek Vanguard, which is a series that runs parallel to the original series era, 2265 to roughly 2269, with a
Mhm.
little bit of a prologue before and a little bit of a epilogue after. But essentially, the idea behind Vanguard was that there were events that happened off screen during the original series that had effects we saw in the original series. Things we saw happen in the original series had consequences that we never saw off screen. So this was the story that runs parallel to that. And it's essentially a story of unsung heroes, of the people who are going to struggle in the shadows to try and make a better world, but have to make all these terrible sacrifices, all these terrible choices. And nobody's ever going to know what they gave up. No one's going to remember who died. A lot of people die, uh, and it ends up being for no good reason, or they die and they're forgotten, or they die and the circumstances have to be concealed for a variety of reasons: national security, international peace, interstellar peace, whatever. Um, and so it's very much a sort of a tragic counterpoint to TOS, and it's also at its heart, it's a story about redemption. So the two characters who really embody it most are the main character Diego Reyes, the Commodore, and T'Prin, the Vulcan sort of security, not security. She's an intelligence officer. She's basically uh, Starfleet intelligence section chief. She's a spy master. She runs spies. She cultivates and runs assets. She coordinates intelligence gathering and intelligence analysis. So it's a little different than a security chief. But all the characters in Vanguard have these layered, weird backstories and the way they all fit together. And we designed it that way to be unlike any other Star Trek series. So we mixed up all the jobs so that it wasn't like another captain, XO, chief medical officer, engineer. What we have is a Commodore with command over an entire sector and a top secret operation at the heart of it. We have Justinian, the diplomatic head of mission for the Federation. So we have a civilian diplomat. We have Tim Pennington, a civilian reporter who's always digging around, trying to find the truth behind things and uncovering secrets that other people would like to keep hidden. You've got Deprin, an intelligence section chief who's running spies and running counterintelligence operations. You got a guy named Cervantes Quinn, a former mercenary turned smuggler turned drunk, who's basically just a guy caught up in events that are way too big for him to understand. You've got Gans, an Orion crime lord. You've got a whole host of extras, crewing the starships. You've got Ming Zhang, the xenoarchaeology expert who's leading the mission to unravel the ancient Shaddai mystery, which in the end we find out is the foundation for the Genesis device. And we bring in all kinds of guest stars. We bring in Nagura. We bring in Dr. Carol Marcus. Characters from across the Trek milieu come together. And so Vanguard would really be my favorite. Um, which of course is completely separate from the post Nemesis era. But there you go.
Right. Yeah. I just had a guest on who said that Vanguard was their absolute favorite Trek. And I'm trying to remember who it was because I just had a few guests recently. I want to say it was Emmett, but I
Oh,
could
that
be
makes sense.
wrong. But I
Yeah,
want to say it was Emmett because he gave me high praise during our episode. um,
Emmett's a good dude. Emmett's a good dude.
he really, really is. Now, of course, okay, I admit Coda is legit one of my favorite series. Okay,
Aw, thank you.
especially with the expanded universe. And I actually was just on this new podcast called Trecommendation, and I recommended Coda for everyone to listen to. And now I talked to Dayton last year, and I had, he explained about how it all came out with Picard coming out and Kirsten letting you know what was happening.
Hmm.
So, how did it make you feel, though, that the timeline you guys worked so hard to create was just going to be poof?
We saw it coming. The writing was on the wall from the moment they started talking about doing a Picard series, and I was on the phone call for the group meeting where that conversation began. Way back in, like, December of 2017, December 2018, something like that. So I was one
Mhm.
of the people on the group call, and I knew it was coming down the pike. I saw it coming, so I was like, all right, we have to start thinking about how we're going to wrap this up. And as I'm sure Dayton told you, we came down to there's really only two ways to go about it. You burn out or you fade away. It's one or the other. Either you simply stop what you're doing and it all just sort of, halts wherever it is, and that's the status quo, or you try to give some kind of narrative closure to this thing that you and dozens of your fellow, colleagues in the narrative trenches have worked on for 20 years. Which way do you want to go? And Dayton and I both agreed, we'd rather burn out. We'd rather take a shot at narrative closure, even if some people feel like, why did you have to bring it to an end? I'd rather that than just have it sort of peter out, fade away, unexplained, and the books just stop coming out without any explanation. I would rather feel like there was a story, even if it's not necessarily the story that some fans would have liked it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome that you guys even got that chance to do that because when The Force Awakens came out, the Star Wars
Mhm.
book just faded away, which is gone, right? Like no
They
Mara
chose
Jade, no
yeah, they chose Fade Away,
yeah.
and fans seemed a bit annoyed with Fade Away. And I'm like, well, there's really no right answer. Someone's always going to be angry no matter what you do. So if they're going to be angry at us, let them be angry at us for something we've done instead of something we didn't do. Let there at least be a job attached that we got paid to write, and they can be angry at us for that, and we'll have gotten paid, as opposed to them
Eh,
being angry at us and we haven't gotten paid. So I chose to get paid and have people be angry at me.
Absolutely. I would have done the same thing, but I feel like it just gave those stories closure, which is
Thank
what
you.
the Star Wars fans didn't get with that whole, I mean, the expanded universe was huge in Star Wars and it was just
I
gone,
know. Yeah.
So yeah, it was when I was because I listened to most of it at work and I remember when I was first listening to it, and of course Dayton's book is the first one, and old Wesley shows up and then dies, and I'm like, what am I listening to? It's like the emotions are already kicking me, and I'm like, I got two more books. So I was like, what is going on? But that's what fans love. Like when you love these characters so much, and you're hearing these wonderful stories that you could just see happening, in your mind. That to me is the beauty of the imagination and just continuing with those stories and just loving the characters even more than you never thought that you could.
Hmm.
So absolutely love that about Coda. Now, you were a creative consultant for Lower Decks, and you did
Hmm.
work on Prodigy, and now
Hmm.
you co-wrote Star Trek Con. So I'm a huge fan of audio dramas. Like I love audio dramas, and so this was a delight. Now, how does it feel though to write for such amazing character stories outside of the litverse?
Well, I mean, it's a different set of challenges as a writer. When you're writing narrative prose for a novel, you have complete control of the setting. You can go inside a character's head. You have access to all five of the senses in how you write a scene. When you write for audio drama, you're writing strictly for the ear. That's it. You don't really have much of an opportunity to appeal to other senses except as you are able to plant the idea via dialogue or via sound. So it's a very different challenge. You have to think in terms of, playwriting almost. I mean, you saw this in, going all the way back to the earliest days of stage drama with Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, and you see it even in Shakespeare because of the limited ability to build sets and the rather Spartan nature of stages throughout most of history. You have dialogue where characters will say, what a fine morning this is. What a great day for a walk in the woods. And boom, you've got your setting, and they might give you some sensory details. Uh, and it's like, why are you narrating the obvious? Well, because if we don't, you don't know where the hell we are. That's why. So you've got to narrate the obvious sometimes in order to make audio drama work. And it depends, on how complex the environments are. It helps to have, what they call distinct sonic environments. So an engineering area sounds different than, say, sick bay. You have exteriors that have a different kind of sound. You can have underwater. You've got caves. Uh, so you have to think in terms of sonic environments, and also distinct character voices, not just in terms of how they sound, not just their accents, but how they speak, the words they would choose. Does someone have a terse way of speaking? Do they tend to have long recursive sentences that bend back on themselves, like Jed Bartlett in The West Wing? Are you talking about someone who's almost monosyllabic? Do you have someone who mostly would pick Germanic terms as opposed to Latinate terms? You have to think about these things as you try to figure out what's going to make one character's dialogue sound distinct from someone else's, even if, say, the two actors unfortunately have voices that are a little similar in terms of their sound. You've got to find some way to distinguish them. So that was one of the things I was thinking about. But in terms of the characters, writing for the characters is really not that different. I mean, you have to get inside their head. You got to figure out what it is they want, what is in their way, what are they willing to do to get it. How do the characters play off of each other? How does what Marla wants and needs versus what Khan wants and needs? How do these wants and needs come into conflict? How do these two people change each other? Marla has to change and grow in order to rise to the challenge of being Khan's equal on SETI Alpha 5. But Khan, likewise, has to engage with Marla, and he has to grow and be willing to change and adapt to a new situation and adapt to the skills that she's trying to share with him to make him a better leader in a situation he's never faced before. On SETI Alpha 5, he's no longer in a position of having to conquer. This is not Earth, where he and a small group of supermen are up against billions of human beings who don't want to be ruled. This is them given an opportunity to conquer a wilderness and build their own empire together as brothers and sisters. This is a challenge unlike any he's ever faced, and his old leadership skills are not necessarily the right ones for this job. What he needs are the skills and mindsets that he's going to learn by engaging with Marla and treating her as an equal and learning to respect her viewpoint as a more evolved human of 2 centuries, down the road. Um, so in terms of the characters, I mean, that was really the issue, was learning to see how they're going to evolve and grow because of their effects on each other and in the larger scope of the whole cast, one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, I loved the story. I loved where you guys went with it, and just it made, now if I go back to watch Wrath of Khan, I'll be like, I get it. Like I see it, I understand it. I'm like, okay, I see now where Khan is coming from. So that's what I really enjoyed about it. Now, would there be any story that you would want to do as an audio drama, like maybe Beverly Crusher's 20 Years of Missing? I've already talked to Dayton. I was like, write a book. We got to know what she did for 20 years. But besides that, anything else that you'd be like, this would be a good audio drama story to tell to the Trekkies out there?
There are a number of stories that Kirsten and I have talked about wanting to work on together, but we haven't really settled on one. There are some that she thinks would work that I think are not really going to adapt well to audio. There are some that I want to work on that she's not sold on in terms of their appeal to the mass audience. We both would like to work on a new one together, but it depends on how this one does in terms of viewership. We know that from a critical standpoint, a content standpoint, the folks at CBS and Secret Hideout are really happy with what we've made in Con, and fans seem to have really enjoyed it. We don't know yet whether it's going to be deemed successful enough that we're going to be asked to make any more. That happens at a level way above me, so nobody tells me anything. So I don't know yet if they're going to commission more of these. If they do, if and when they do, then Kirsten and I, hopefully, if we get hired to do it, then she and I will sit down and we'll start having some serious conversations about what kind of stories do we want to tell, what kind of stories can we tell, and what do we think the audience wants? What do we think the audience will respond to?
Very cool. I love that. Now, since this is a Beverly Crusher podcast, what is it about her character that you'd love to write about? And is there anything you would want to write about of her in the future?
Uh, I always liked writing her relationship with Picard and the way she challenged him. And the fact that it was very obvious that these two were sort of clearly meant to be together. She was, in many ways, his moral touchstone. And it seems to me that a lot of the ways that Picard went wrong, at least narratively in the novels, in the post-Nemesis era, can be tracked back to the fact that he did not immediately, hook up with her at the end of, say, TNG season 7. They farted around all through the movies and somehow still didn't wind up together. And I'm just like, why the hell not? What's going on? What's wrong with you, buddy? Come on. Something's wrong with you here. And so all the ways in which he went wrong, I attribute it to he just should have gotten together with her earlier. And none of this would ever have happened. So, and then once he does get together with her, his life starts to go right, except, of course, for that whole blip in Destiny where, they get together, they get married, they conceive their first child together in the litverse. And, of course, in the vein of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, no sooner does he embrace this moment of, trying to seize happiness for himself and Beverly, than the Borg threat returns to wipe out the Federation. And egotist that he is, he blames himself for having the hubris to try and be happy. And it's like, oh, you rank egotistical fool, as if this had anything to do with you. This had nothing to do with you. But he has to see it as being all about him because he and the Borg, he's special, and then in later years after they've got a kid and he starts to change. His focus becomes his wife, his family. He starts thinking about his son. He starts thinking long term about, do I really want to stay out here another 20 years or do I want to give my family a more stable life? And Beverly at some point is almost like, well, this isn't the man I married. I married a larger than life hero. And now suddenly, instead of jumping to protect the president, you protected me. And he's like, well, of course I protected you. We can get another president. We have a vice president for a reason. We have a council for a reason. There's a chain of succession for a reason. If you die, my kid doesn't have another mother. It's like Picard's whole paradigm of thinking has shifted. It's like, the president, yeah, in my old life, I would have jumped to protect the president. Now I got to protect the mother of my child.
I love that. You wrote Picard perfectly. You had him down just to a T. But now, in the next part of this podcast, is going to be the fan questions. It's called Penny for Your Thought.
Penny for your thoughts.
All right, I have Tim from FSF Podcast. You were on his podcast, but unfortunately you didn't get to meet Tim because he was becoming a grandfather at that time. So, but this was a question that he had for you. Star Trek has always stood for diversity and inclusion. What is your favorite Trek story that you best feels best demonstrates what Trek stands for and gives us hope for humanity's future?
The message of Trek really comes through beautifully. There's a first season episode of DS9 called Duet, and in it you have Kira challenged with this, meeting up with this figure who apparently is a war criminal from her time in the Bajoran resistance when Bajor was occupied by the Cardassians. And there's this back and forth, is he really the war criminal, or is he, who he claims to be just the war criminal's clerk? And it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And eventually it comes out, spoiler alert, that he is in fact the clerk who has had himself surgically altered to resemble the war criminal, because the war criminal died without ever facing justice. And the clerk was so profoundly disturbed and emotionally damaged by what he witnessed and by the fact that nobody was ever going to pay for these crimes, that he was willing to pay for them in proxy, if no one else was. If nobody else was going to take responsibility, he was going to take it. And Kira, when she figures this out, she realizes this is actually a good man, that he doesn't deserve this. And then, as she's walking with him on the promenade at the end, another former member of the Bajoran militia who doesn't know the whole story, who doesn't know who this guy really is, thinks he's the war criminal, stabs the guy, kills him. And Kira has to hold the dying Cardassian guy as he's bleeding out on the deck, and she's like yelling at this Bajoran assassin. She's like, he wasn't Eamon Maritza. We established he's not Eamon Maritza. What's wrong with it? And he says, he's Cardassian. That's reason enough. And she's like, no, it isn't. And it's like, this is a breakthrough moment for Kira, who up to this point has been just as guilty of racial animus as many of her countrymen, and with good reason. But in this episode, she is forced to confront her prejudices, her pain, and see that there is the possibility that not everybody is monolithic among the Cardassian people, that there were people among the Cardassians who were morally opposed to what happened, just as she was, who could have been her allies. And she has to learn, she basically grows as a character. She starts to grow beyond her own prejudices, and to realize how painful it is to see that some of her countrymen have not. And it's a very moving episode, but I think that what I love about it is that it goes to the heart of Trek, which is, it's not enough to say, well, one day we're going to have a better future and we'll all get along and won't that be great? It's, you want that better future, you got to work for it. You have to confront your own beliefs. You have to confront your own prejudices, your own hatreds, and you've got to move past them to see people as they are, not as you think they are, and to try to find the diversity in them, try to find the good in them by showing them the good in yourself. And that episode, I think, really gets to the heart of it in a very powerful and poignant and tragic way. But that's the way that lesson sometimes has to be taught.
Absolutely. Duet is a favorite of mine, and it's a favorite among a lot of people. So
Beautiful
I
episode.
love that. It's a beautiful episode. Yeah. Next question comes from Following Films podcast. How do you balance staying true to canon when introducing bold new ideas or character developments? And has there been an idea you couldn't do due to the limitations of continuity?
Okay, I mean, with canon, people seem to have this notion that every detail that gets established in canon closes down a possibility in tie-in fiction. In fact, it's the opposite. The more details and richness that gets established about the canon universe, first of all, the more questions it raises. It's like, okay, well then, where did this guy come from, and what happened as a consequence of that, and what was the setup for that? The bigger the universe gets, the more questions it engenders, and that's where stories come from. Second, in terms of bold new ideas and character developments, when we were working in the post Nemesis era and we had the freedom to change characters' status quo, where we weren't limited to what had been shown on screen, we were moving past it. All we really had to worry about was not necessarily, is this going to contradict canon, but is this consistent
with the growth arc of the character as we've seen it in canon? Is there something about this character's past, something they've said, something they've done, an arc of growth or change that they've shown over the years that would lead one to think that reasonably you can extrapolate from there to here? Is that plausible? So that's how we approached a lot of that in the books. And in terms of bold new ideas, I mean, sometimes the bold new idea is just a matter of, putting a character in a situation they haven't been in before, or trying to just find a fun idea to play with. But like, for instance, in my latest novel, Ring of Fire, the bold idea was to have this ship from the past or maybe the future, but it's basically a time ship, and its loss and then an attempt to recover it ties into stories in the past of the characters and also the present of the characters. And it turns out that the whole thing is a big story about regret and loss, and basically figuring out how to put aside, first of all, learning how to forgive yourself, and B, learning how to break old patterns of behavior. Uh, and so the big idea, the science fictional idea that takes us into the story, is a gimmick, and it provides a foundation for the story, but the story ultimately has to come from inside the characters. It has to come from Pike realizing, that this was part of a mission he was on 16 years ago that brought him here, and now he's been brought back, clearly for a reason. There's almost a karmic debt to it. And that it ties into an event from his youth, a seemingly unrelated event, but one that's thematically related, and one that, again, I pulled from canon. There's a story in Ring of Fire that he pulls from his teen years about uh, a mishap when he was trying to rope and corral and control a horse, and an accident occurs and the horse dies, and it affected him profoundly. It's downplayed. It's in the episode "What Is Starfleet." It's part of the talking head interviews that are done with him, and in that particular one, he's sitting with Una on his right as he talks about it. And I thought that's a fascinating story, and I want to dig into that. So I found sort of the deep emotional resonance of that, and I figured he doesn't ever really explain why it happened or what he was thinking about when it happened. So I tried to find the psychological context for that event, and then connected it thematically to the events that are going on in the story during his Starfleet years, and try to find how this creates a pattern in his life that he needs to break free from in order to grow and change and become a better person. So the bold ideas come from the characters, not necessarily from the plot concepts.
Got it. Yeah, that's so cool. What is Starfleet actually is a favorite of mine, so that's nice that you pulled that from there. Last question from Ed from My Figure Universe. Only a Paper Moon is by far one of his favorites. Were there any elements from the story that were left out in the final script that wish you made better? We did talk a little bit about the scene that you wish we had, but was there anything else that you were like, ooh, I would have loved to have seen that?
Well, the scene that I told you about was not ever going to be part of Paper Moon. That was part of the original story idea that we pitched in '95. The story that was developed in '98, the way that happened was we pitched our story about everybody comes to Quarks. And they were like, we like it, but we don't know how to use it right now, but we like it. And we're going to put a flag on this. And they had a folder, and it had our names on the cover. And every now and then, over the course of the next 3 years, they would come back to it. They'd say, well, all right, we need an episode here. What about this one? We like this one. Can we use this one? Is there a way to make this one work? And they would talk about it, and they would come up with some more ideas. Well, what if we change this? Or what if we add in this? Can we link it to this episode somehow? And they'd add a bunch of notes. And for 3 years, they would go, no, we still like it, but it just doesn't fit yet. Put it aside. And they did this. And then finally, they come around to season 7. They're almost done. They've started production on season 7. They're like, all right, we need a bottle episode to deal with this Nog thing after Siege of AR 558. And we've spent all this money building all of these Vic Fontaine Vegas hollow sets. And we got to justify the cost of having built these things. We got to use them in more than one episode, or production is just going to hate us. how else can we use these sets? What can we do here? So, well, we have that bottle episode that we were going to take from Mack and Ordover. It was in quarks. What if we set it in VIX? Is there a way to make that work? And that started their conversation. They said, okay, not the original story, but yeah, we do it in VIX, and we move the Nog story into VIX, and we marry the two together. And I went, yeah, that works. That's pretty good. Then we can use the VIX sets. That's terrific. Okay, get Mack and Ordover on the line and have them rewrite the story. So we get a call 3 years after we pitched this. We get a call from Ron Moore. He's like, I want to get on a conference call with you guys tonight. We got to talk about the story. We're like, great. We're like, hey, we finally sold this thing. And then he tells us what it has turned into. He's like, okay, Siege of AR 558. Nog gets his leg blown off in combat. This episode, he's coming home to the station after medical therapy. He's got a prosthetic cybernetic leg. He's got phantom pain. He doesn't respond well to regular therapy. He's going to do his therapy somehow in the Vic Fontaine Holosuite program. And so, we need you to write that up. And John and I are like, okay. Why is Nog doing his therapy in the Vic Fontaine Holosuites? I swear to God, this was Ron's answer. How the hell am I supposed to know? It's your story. Okay. All right. Sure. So we got stuck with that. We're trying to figure that out. And then before the phone call ended, we said, Ron, we just wanted to check. I mean, the story you're asking us to redraft here bears almost no semblance whatsoever to what we pitched 3 years ago. You guys could have developed this in-house without us. We would never have known the difference. Why are we getting the call? And Ron says, because we would not have arrived at this conversation if not for your pitch. Your pitch, which has stayed in the mix for 3 years, is the one that eventually got the conversation to a place it needed to go. And when we look at the front of that folder, it has your names on it. So it's your story. You guys get the rewrite on the story. We'll give you credit. You'll get paid. And then I'll take the teleplay. And we were like, done. And so that's part of why I always know that whenever someone says, oh, Trek stole my idea. No, they didn't. Especially not if you're talking about people like Ron Moore or Ira Stephen Bear or Hans Beimler or Robert Hewitt Wolf. None of those guys. These are some of the most honorable, upstanding, decent people in Hollywood. They are ethical. They are honest. They're hardworking and professional like nobody else I've ever seen. I mean, if he was willing to do that over a 3-year-old story pitch when they didn't have to, why would they steal someone's idea? If they were going to steal ideas, why not take that one and run with it? Why call us? It's because they don't do that. That's not who they are. And so in terms of getting stuff into Paper Moon, the funny thing is, even though John and I have the writing credit on Starship Down as written by John Ordover and David Mack or whatever, fewer of our actual words made it into Starship Down than made it into Paper Moon. Like, Starship Down went through so many in-house rewrites, which is completely normal. But by the time they were done, the script that was shot had very little similarity to the one they paid us to write and that we turned in. Whereas Paper Moon, all we got paid for was a 5 or 6 page story outline. That's it. But it got drafted by Ron brilliantly. He did it in like 2 drafts, I think. It was very few drafts. It happened very quickly with minor adjustments for shooting as they went along. As a result, more of what we put in the outline, word for word, came out on the screen than did in Starship Down. Even though we only have story credit, more of what John and I did, more of our actual work, made it into the episode than it did on Starship Down. So TV writing is a funny thing. And there's really nothing I can think of that I would want to put into Paper Moon that isn't there. It's beautifully balanced. It's beautifully executed. Aaron Eisenberg knocked it out of the park, as did James Darren. Everybody was great in it. It's one of those episodes I continue to get, fan mail from soldiers overseas who are binge watching DS9 just now. And, here it is. It's almost 30 years later. And it is still a profoundly affecting work because it speaks to the life of many soldiers who have, lost friends in action or who have had friends who had to go, leave the service because of loss of limbs in combat or due to accident, in action or in service. And so it's one of those things that it was one of the more important things I worked on. And when I wrote it, I was drawing on some of my own experience from my youth. I was in a pretty bad car accident when I was 21, and I spent about 6 months learning to walk again. So I was particularly empathetic to Nog's story about losing a leg and having to deal with things like phantom pain and learning to walk and basically getting over the loss of invincibility, the loss of that illusion that you are immortal and invincible because you're young. You have that sudden realization, if this can happen to your leg today, it can happen to your head tomorrow. And I had lived that, so I was able to bring that to the story, and then Ron brought it to the script, and then Aaron brought it to life.
Wow, that's great. Dave, it was so great speaking with you tonight. Let everyone know where they can find you and if you have any new projects or anything you want to pitch.
Well, you can find me at my website, davidmack.pro. That's David Mack, M-A-C-K, .pro. And that's my official website. It's got new releases. Anytime I have something new to announce, it'll probably wind up on the front page of that. If you ever have a question about whether I wrote something or whether the comic book guy who have the same name wrote something, you can check my website. If it's not on my website, I didn't write it. So if it's like comic books, if it's Kabuki, Daredevil, it was probably him. If it's Star Trek, if it's a novel, an audio drama, it's probably me. But check my website. I've got a whole list of official credits. If you want to follow me on social media, where I'm incredibly foul-mouthed and opinionated, just like everybody else, I'm on Blue Sky at davidmack.pro. It's a self-verified website, and it's also a recently Blue Sky verified account. So you plug it in. There's also davidmack.com on Blue Sky, which is also me, but that's a work-only feed. No politics, no personal crap, just work-related books, stories, sales notifications, things like that. So if you want the Trek news and the information about my titles, but you don't necessarily want to see my particular flavor of politics or personal whatever coming through your feed all the time, you can use davidmack.com. But assuming you're in this for the whole Megillah, davidmack.pro is my official Blue Sky account.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate and hope everyone has a wonderful night. Live long and prosper. Thanks, guys. Bye. Don't forget, you can listen to all the audio versions of Crusher Convo on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can support the podcast by buying merch on TeePublic, buy me a coffee by scanning that QR code, or becoming a Patreon member for as low as $3 a month. But the best way to support Crusher Convo is to like and subscribe here on YouTube. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, or TikTok, so please follow me there. And of course, all this information can be found on crusherconvo.com.
Crusher out.